Emma opened her eyes slowly as the morning sunlight filtered through the curtains. She reached across the bed, expecting to feel Tom's warm body, but her hand found only empty sheets. She sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes and listening. The sound of running water came from their small bathroom. It was Saturday, their first free weekend in almost a month. Tom usually slept in on weekends, often until Emma woke him with coffee and kisses. She checked the time, just past 8. Early for him to be up already. Emma pushed back the covers and stood, stretching her arms above her head. She wore only one of Tom's old t-shirts that hung loosely on her smaller frame. Their apartment was quiet except for the steady sound of the shower. She walked to the kitchen, thinking she would start coffee, but stopped when she saw Tom had already made some. A single mug sat waiting for her, still warm. "That's sweet," she whispered, picking up the mug and taking a small sip. The coffee was prepared exactly how she liked it. A splash of milk and 1 sugar. Next to where the mug had been, she noticed a small folded note. Emma opened it to find Tom's messy handwriting. "Join me." Emma felt a flutter in her chest, a sensation that had become less frequent in recent months. 2 years into their relationship, they had fallen into comfortable routines. The excitement that once made her heart race whenever Tom walked into a room had gradually faded into a steady warmth. Nice but less thrilling than before. She carried her coffee down the short hallway and paused outside the bathroom door. Steam escaped through the small gap under the door. Emma thought about their last few weeks together. They had both been busy with work, often too tired for more than a quick kiss goodnight. Conversations had become practical, about bills, groceries, and schedules, rather than dreams and feelings like when they first met. Emma placed her mug on the small table in the hallway. She touched the door handle and hesitated. In the early days of their relationship, surprising each other in the shower had been common, but when had that stopped? 6 months ago? Maybe longer? She twisted the handle and pushed the door open slightly. Warm steam rushed out to greet her, carrying the clean scent of Tom's soap. Through the steam, she could make out Tom's shape behind the shower curtain. He was humming softly, a song from the concert where they had their first date. Emma stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The bathroom mirror was completely fogged up. On its steamy surface, Tom had drawn a heart with his finger. Such a simple thing, but it made Emma smile wider than she had in weeks. She placed her hand against the heart on the mirror, leaving her own mark within his. Then, making a sudden decision, she pulled Tom's t-shirt over her head and let it drop to the floor. "Tom," she called softly. The humming stopped. "Emma, is that you?" "Were you expecting someone else in our bathroom?" she teased, feeling a playfulness that had been missing lately. Tom laughed, the sound echoing slightly in the tiled room. "Very funny. Did you find my note?" "I did. That was sweet of you." Emma moved closer to the shower. "The coffee too." "I woke up early and watched you sleeping," Tom said, his voice slightly muffled by the water. "You looked so beautiful. I realized we haven't had much time together lately, really together, you know." Emma did know. Between her promotion and Tom's new project, they had been like ships passing in the night, sharing space but rarely connecting. "I've missed you," she admitted, surprised by the emotion in her voice. The shower curtain moved slightly and Tom peeked his head out. Water dripped from his dark hair down his face. His eyes found hers, and the look in them made Emma remember why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. His gaze was tender, appreciative, and filled with an invitation. "I've missed you too," he said softly, "more than I realized until this morning." He extended his hand to her, water droplets running down his arm. "So what do you say? Would you like to join me?" "I think we have some catching up to do." Emma took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin against hers. It was like coming home after a long journey. As Tom gently pulled her toward the shower, Emma felt that flutter in her chest grow stronger. Maybe what they needed wasn't anything dramatic or life-changing. Maybe they just needed this. A quiet morning, an invitation, and the courage to step back into intimacy. "I would love to," she whispered, stepping forward into the steam. The warm water embraced Emma as she stepped into the shower with Tom. Steam swirled around them, creating a small, private world. Tom's eyes never left hers as he made room for her under the shower head. Water cascaded down her skin, but Emma barely noticed. She was lost in the way Tom was looking at her. like he was seeing her for the first time again. "I didn't think you would actually join me," Tom said, his voice soft against the sound of falling water. "Why not?" Emma asked, letting the water soak her hair. Tom pushed a wet strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "We've been like strangers lately, both here but not really present." Emma nodded, feeling the truth of his words. "I know, work has been crazy for both of us." "It's not just work," Tom said. He reached for the shampoo bottle and squeezed some into his palm. "Turn around," he instructed gently. Emma turned, and Tom's fingers began working the shampoo into her hair. His touch was tender as he massaged her scalp. Emma closed her eyes, surrendering to the simple pleasure of being cared for. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Tom continued. "About us. About how easy it is to fall into patterns where we're just going through the motions." Emma hummed in agreement, her eyes still closed as Tom's fingers worked magic on her scalp. "When did we stop really seeing each other?" she asked. Tom guided her under the shower stream to rinse her hair. "I don't know exactly. It happened so slowly I didn't notice until I woke up this morning and watched you sleeping." Emma turned to face him again, water running down between them. "What did you see?" "I saw the woman I fell in love with," Tom said simply, "and I realized I've been taking you for granted." Emma felt her heart expand in her chest. She reached for the body wash and poured some into her hands. "I've been doing the same," she admitted, beginning to wash Tom's shoulders. Her hands moved in slow circles across his skin. Tom closed his eyes at her touch. "Remember when we first started dating? How we used to stay up all night just talking?" Emma smiled, her hands continuing their gentle journey across his chest. "And how we would send each other random messages during the day, just because we were thinking of each other. Or how we would cook dinner together," Tom added. "Actually cook together, not just order takeout and eat in front of the TV." Their eyes met, both recognizing how much had changed without either of them intending it to. The shower continued to rain down on them, washing away not just the shampoo and soap, but something else, the invisible barrier that had grown between them. "Tom," Emma said, her voice catching slightly, "I don't want to lose us." Tom pulled her closer, their wet bodies pressing together. Water ran down their faces like tears, but their eyes were bright. "We haven't lost us," he whispered against her ear. "We just misplaced us for a while." Emma wrapped her arms around him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her chest. In that moment, the shower felt like the most intimate place in the world. Not because they were naked, but because they were truly seeing each other again. Tom reached behind Emma and turned off the water. The sudden silence made the moment feel even more important. Droplets clung to their skin as they stood there, holding each other. "I have something planned for us today," Tom said, finally breaking the silence. "Something to help us find our way back." Emma looked up at him, curiosity mixing with the love in her eyes. "What is it?" Tom smiled, the same smile that had made her fall for him 2 years ago. "First, let's get dressed. It's a surprise." He reached for the shower curtain and pulled it open. Cool air rushed in, causing goosebumps to rise on their wet skin. Tom stepped out first and reached for 2 towels. He wrapped one around his waist before tenderly wrapping the other around Emma. As he gently dried her shoulders, Emma realized that what had just happened between them in the shower wasn't about physical closeness. It was about vulnerability, about washing away pretenses and seeing each other clearly again. "Whatever you have planned," Emma said, looking up into Tom's eyes, "this was already perfect." Tom leaned down and kissed her softly, his lips warm against hers. "This is just the beginning," he promised. His eyes held a secret, the hint of something special waiting for her. "Today is about remembering why we fell in love in the first place." Emma smiled and leaned into his touch, feeling like they were writing a new chapter in their story, one droplet at a time. After getting dressed, Emma sat on the edge of the bed as she dried her hair with a towel. Tom had been mysteriously moving around the apartment, checking his phone and gathering things into a small backpack. His excitement was obvious in his quick movements and the way he kept glancing at her with a secret smile. "Are you going to tell me what you're planning?" Emma asked, running a brush through her damp hair. Tom zipped up the backpack and came to sit beside her. "If I tell you, it won't be a surprise anymore." He took her hand in his, running his thumb over her knuckles. "But I will say that I've been thinking about this for a while. Today just felt like the right time." Emma leaned against his shoulder. The shower was nice. I've missed those moments with you. Me too, Tom agreed, kissing the top of her head. But I think we both know it's going to take more than a shower to get us back to where we were. Emma nodded, knowing he was right. The distance between them had grown slowly over months. It wouldn't disappear in a single morning, no matter how perfect that morning felt. So, Tom said, standing up and pulling her to her feet. Are you ready for part 2 of Operation Remember Why We're Together? Emma laughed, the sound light and genuine. Is that what you're calling it? Too cheesy? Tom asked with a grin. Just the right amount of cheese, Emma said, reaching up to touch his face. His cheeks were smooth. He had shaved while she was drying her hair. He had even put on the cologne she had given him last Christmas, the one he usually saved for special occasions. Tom grabbed the backpack and his car keys. Let's go. They drove with the windows down, the spring air fresh and full of promise. Tom turned on the radio, and a song they both loved came on. Without thinking, they started singing along, their voices blending as they had so many times before. Remember that road trip we took last summer? Emma asked during a break in the music. When we got lost and ended up at that little diner in the middle of nowhere? Tom smiled, keeping his eyes on the road. And they had the best pie we'd ever tasted, apple with cinnamon ice cream. I still dream about that pie, Emma said with a laugh. The conversation flowed easily as Tom drove, memories surfacing like treasures long forgotten. They talked about their first date, their first fight, the time they got caught in a rainstorm and ran 3 blocks to find shelter. After about 30 minutes, Tom pulled into a familiar parking lot. Emma looked out the window and felt her heart skip a beat. It was the small botanical garden where they had first said I love you to each other. Tom, she whispered, turning to him with wide eyes. I thought we could walk through the gardens, he said, suddenly looking nervous. Is that okay? Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The fact that he had remembered this place, that he had chosen it for today of all days, made her love him even more. They walked hand in hand through the garden paths. Spring flowers were blooming everywhere, daffodils, tulips, and cherry blossoms. The air was sweet with their scent. It looks exactly the same, Emma said as they reached the small Japanese bridge where Tom had first told her he loved her. The bridge arched over a narrow stream where koi fish swam lazily in the clear water. Tom led her to the middle of the bridge and turned to face her. Do you remember what you said to me that day? Emma smiled. I said that loving you was the easiest thing I'd ever done. Tom's eyes softened. And I said that I had been falling in love with you since the moment we met. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Emma's breath caught as he opened it and tipped a delicate silver ring into his palm. This isn't an engagement ring, Tom clarified quickly, seeing her expression. It's a promise ring. A promise of what? Emma asked softly. Tom held the ring between his fingers, the silver catching the sunlight. A promise that I'll never again take what we have for granted. A promise to keep fighting for us, even when life gets busy or hard. He looked into her eyes. A promise to remember how it feels to stand here with you right now, completely in love. Emma felt tears form in her eyes as Tom continued. We lost our way a little bit, but I think what happened in the shower this morning was us finding our way back to each other. He held out the ring to her. So Emma, will you accept this promise? To keep finding our way back to each other, no matter what. Emma looked at the simple silver band, then at Tom's hopeful face, and felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. In that moment, she knew that what had started as a simple invitation to join him in the shower had become something much more important, the beginning of their journey back to each other. Yes, Emma whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Yes, I accept your promise. Tom's face lit up with joy as he gently slipped the silver ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made just for her. Emma looked down at it, watching how the sunlight made it shine against her skin. It's beautiful, she said, turning her hand to admire how the simple band caught the light. I had it engraved, Tom said, his voice soft. He took her hand and turned the ring so she could see the inside. There, in tiny letters, were the words, "Always find our way back." Emma felt tears spill onto her cheeks as she read the words. She threw her arms around Tom's neck, holding him tightly. I love you, she said against his shoulder. I love you so much. Tom's arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, his own eyes were shining with unshed tears. "I love you too." They stood there on the bridge, holding each other as people walked past them with knowing smiles. In that moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the garden, in the whole world even. "I have one more surprise," Tom said finally, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "There's more?" Emma asked, wiping away her happy tears. "Tom, this is already the most perfect day." Tom took her hand, the one now wearing his promise ring, and led her away from the bridge. "The day isn't over yet." They walked through another section of the garden, past flowers of every color and shape. Tom kept checking his phone, as if making sure they were on time for something. Eventually they came to a small clearing surrounded by cherry trees in full bloom. In the center of the clearing was a picnic blanket with a basket. "You planned a picnic?" Emma asked, delighted by the sight. Tom nodded. "With all your favorites. I got those strawberries you love from the farmer's market yesterday, and that cheese we had on our first date. Oh, and," he reached into the basket and pulled out a bottle. "That sparkling cider we drank when we celebrated your promotion." Emma couldn't believe how much thought Tom had put into this day. Every detail was connected to a memory they shared. She sat down on the blanket, feeling overwhelmed in the best possible way. Tom joined her, unpacking the food with care. There were small sandwiches, cut fruit, cheese and crackers, and chocolate-covered strawberries for dessert. He had thought of everything. As they ate, they continued to talk about their memories together and their hopes for the future. The conversation was easier now, more open, as if the promised ring had sealed a new understanding between them. "I've been thinking," Emma said, picking up a strawberry, "maybe we should start setting aside one day each week just for us. No work, no phones, just time to be together." "I'd like that," Tom agreed immediately. "Sunday mornings could be our time. We could make breakfast together like we used to." Emma smiled. "And maybe take turns planning something special each month. Like this." She gestured to the picnic. "It doesn't have to be elaborate, just something to remind us to keep making memories." Tom reached across the blanket and took her hand. "That sounds perfect." They finished their meal as the afternoon sun warmed them. Cherry blossom petals occasionally drifted down around them, adding to the magic of the moment. When they had packed everything back into the basket, Tom checked his phone once more. "There's one last part to my surprise," he said with a mysterious smile. "But we need to go back to the main garden for it." Emma stood, curious about what else Tom could have planned. They walked hand in hand back through the pathways, the promised ring a comforting weight on her finger. It was strange how such a small object could feel so significant, like a physical reminder of their renewed commitment to each other. When they reached the central part of the garden, Emma heard music playing. They rounded a corner and she gasped. There, in a small gazebo decorated with fairy lights and flowers, was a string quartet playing the song that had been playing the first time they danced together. Tom turned to her, his eyes full of love. "Emma, may I have this dance?" Emma felt like her heart might burst with happiness. What had started as a simple morning shower had turned into one of the most beautiful days of her life. As Tom led her to the gazebo and took her in his arms, she knew that whatever challenges came their way in the future, they would face them together. They had found their way back to each other, and this time they wouldn't let go. Emma stepped into Tom's arms as the music surrounded them. His hand rested gently on her waist while her fingers intertwined with his. The silver promise ring caught the light as they began to sway together. Other visitors to the garden stopped to watch, smiling at the couple dancing in the gazebo. "I can't believe you arranged all of this," Emma said softly, looking up into Tom's eyes. "I wanted today to be special," Tom replied, guiding her in a slow turn, "to mark a new beginning for us." The string quartet played beautifully, the melody bringing back memories of the first time they had danced together at their friend's wedding 2 years ago. Back then, they had been nervous strangers, neither knowing that dance would be the start of something wonderful. "Do you remember how you stepped on my toes 3 times that night?" Emma teased, her eyes sparkling with the memory. Tom laughed, the sound warm and rich. "And how you pretended it didn't hurt. You were too kind to say anything." "I didn't want to scare you away," Emma admitted. "I liked you too much already." As they danced, the afternoon sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the garden. The fairy lights on the gazebo twinkled more brightly as the daylight faded. Time seemed to slow down, each moment stretching out like honey. When the song ended, the musicians began another, and Tom and Emma continued to dance. They were lost in their own world, reconnecting without words. Emma rested her head against Tom's chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was steady and strong, just like his love for her. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Tom asked, his breath warm against her hair. "For not giving up on us, for seeing what was happening before it was too late." Tom pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "I almost didn't. I almost convinced myself that this was just how relationships are after the excitement wears off." His expression grew serious. "But then I realized that I didn't want to settle for that. Not with you. You deserve more." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes again. "We both do." The music swelled around them as the quartet played the final notes of the song. When it ended, they stopped dancing but remained in each other's arms. The musicians stood and bowed before packing up their instruments. Emma realized they had been hired just for this moment, just for her and Tom. "How did you arrange all this?" she asked as they finally stepped apart, though Tom kept hold of her hand. "I've been planning it for a few weeks," Tom confessed. "I called the garden last month to reserve the gazebo and find musicians. I wasn't sure when the right time would be, but after this morning in the shower, I knew today was the day." They thanked the musicians as they left, and soon Emma and Tom were alone in the gazebo. The garden was closing soon, with only a few visitors still wandering the paths. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. "What now?" Emma asked, not wanting the perfect day to end. Tom smiled and lifted her hand to kiss her knuckles just above the promise ring. "Now we go home, but there's one more surprise waiting there." They walked back to the car hand in hand, the evening air growing cooler around them. Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. Their relationship had changed today, deepened in ways she couldn't yet fully understand. The drive home was quiet, a comfortable silence between them. Tom reached across the console to hold her hand, his thumb occasionally brushing over the new ring on her finger. Emma watched the world pass by outside the window, thinking about everything that had happened since she woke up that morning. When they pulled up to their apartment building, Tom asked her to wait in the car for a moment. He rushed inside, returning 5 minutes later with a smile on his face. "Ready?" he asked, opening her car door. Emma stepped out, curious about what might be waiting in their apartment. As they walked up the stairs together, Tom wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close against his side. At their door, Tom paused. "Close your eyes," he said softly. Emma obeyed, hearing the sound of keys and the door opening. Tom guided her forward carefully, his hand steady on her shoulders. The smell of vanilla and cinnamon greeted her, her favorite scents. "Okay," Tom whispered in her ear. "Open your eyes." Emma opened her eyes and gasped. Their small apartment had been transformed. Candles flickered on every surface, casting a warm, golden light throughout the room. A path of rose petals led from the door to the dining table, which was set beautifully with their best dishes and more flowers. Emma turned to him, overwhelmed by the thought and care he had put into making this day so special. What had started as a simple invitation to join him in the shower had become one of the most memorable days of her life, and it wasn't over yet. Tom led Emma to the table, pulling out her chair with a gentle flourish. "I hope you're still hungry after our picnic," he said, his eyes warm in the candlelight. "After all the dancing, definitely," Emma replied, settling into her seat. The table looked beautiful, with a small vase of her favorite flowers in the center and their best wine glasses sparkling in the candlelight. Tom disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with 2 covered plates. He set one in front of Emma before taking his own seat across from her. With a smile, he lifted the covers to reveal perfectly prepared salmon, Emma's favorite dish. "You cooked this?" Emma asked in surprise. Tom was a decent cook, but salmon had always been tricky for him. "Well," Tom admitted with a sheepish smile, "I had some help from that cooking video you like. I practiced 3 times last week when you were working late." Emma was touched by his admission. While she had been thinking they were drifting apart, Tom had been secretly practicing cooking for her. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It looks amazing." They ate together, the food delicious and the conversation easy. Tom poured them each a glass of the wine they had saved from their first anniversary. As they talked, Emma realized how much she had missed this. Really talking with Tom, not just exchanging information about schedules and bills. "I've been thinking," Tom said after they had finished their meal, "about what you said earlier about setting aside time for us each week." Emma nodded, taking a sip of her wine. "Sunday mornings. Yes, but I was thinking we could do more." Tom leaned forward, his expression earnest. "What if we also plan a proper date night once a month? Something special, like tonight. We take turns planning it." "I'd love that," Emma said, already thinking about what she might plan for her turn. Tom stood and offered his hand to her. "There's dessert, but I thought we might have it somewhere else." Curious, Emma took his hand and let him lead her through their apartment to the bathroom door. Tom opened it, and Emma gasped again. The bathroom had been transformed much like the living room. Candles lined the edge of the tub, which was filled with water and floating rose petals. Soft music played from a small speaker on the counter. "A bath?" Emma asked, her voice soft with wonder. "I thought we could come full circle," Tom explained. "This morning started with us in the shower, reconnecting. I wanted to end the day the same way, just a bit more elaborate." Emma turned to him, her heart so full of love she thought it might burst. "Tom, I don't even have words." Tom wrapped his arms around her waist. "I know we can't solve everything in a single day. Relationships take work, every day. But I wanted today to remind us both of what we have, what's worth fighting for." Emma reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble that had grown throughout the day. "Today has been perfect, but you know what the best part was?" "What?" Tom asked, leaning into her touch. "This morning in the shower, just us being honest with each other. No grand gestures, no elaborate plans, just us remembering why we fell in love." Tom smiled. "That was my favorite part too. Everything else today was wonderful, but that moment, that's when I knew we would be okay." He leaned down and kissed her softly, his lips warm against hers. Emma felt herself melting into him, into the moment. When they pulled apart, Tom gestured to the bath. "Shall we?" They undressed slowly, taking their time in a way they hadn't in months. The promised ring remained on Emma's finger, catching the candlelight as they stepped into the warm water together. Tom sat with his back against the tub, and Emma settled between his legs, leaning back against his chest. The water was perfect, warm but not too hot, scented with the bath oils Emma loved. Rose petals floated around them, and the candles cast a golden glow across the water. Tom wrapped his arms around Emma, holding her close. "I keep thinking about this morning," Emma said, her voice soft in the quiet bathroom. "How different today might have been if I hadn't opened that bathroom door." Tom pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "I'd like to think we would have found our way back to each other eventually. But I'm glad it was today." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the warmth of the water and each other. Emma played with the promise ring on her finger, turning it to catch the light. "Tell me something about the future," she said suddenly, "something you're looking forward to with us." Tom was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I'm looking forward to waking up with you 10 years from now and still feeling the way I do right now." Emma smiled, leaning her head back to look up at him. "That's a good one." "Your turn," Tom said, his fingers gently stroking her arm. Emma closed her eyes, imagining their future together. "I'm looking forward to all the small moments. Sunday mornings making breakfast. Coming home to you after a long day. Dancing in the kitchen for no reason at all." Tom hugged her tighter. "Those are the best parts, aren't they? The moments no one else sees." As they continued to talk softly in the candlelight, sharing hopes and dreams, Emma realized that what had happened in the shower that morning had been more than just a reconnection. It had been a reminder of the most important truth about love, that sometimes it wasn't about grand gestures or perfect plans. Sometimes it was simply about seeing each other clearly, even when life tried to pull you apart. 3 months later, Emma woke early on a Sunday morning. Sunlight filtered through the curtains they had bought together last month, soft blue ones that reminded them both of the sky on the day Tom had given her the promise ring. She turned to look at Tom, still sleeping peacefully beside her. The silver ring caught the light as she reached out to gently brush a strand of hair from his forehead. In the 3 months since that day in the shower, so much had changed between them. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in the small, everyday moments that built a life together. They had kept their promise of Sunday mornings together. Sometimes they made elaborate breakfasts and ate on their small balcony. Other mornings they simply stayed in bed, talking and laughing until hunger finally drove them to the kitchen. But the time was always theirs, protected from work and other obligations. They had taken turns planning their monthly date nights too. Last month, Emma had surprised Tom with tickets to a cooking class where they learned to make pasta from scratch, flour covering their clothes as they laughed at their clumsy attempts. The month before, Tom had taken her stargazing, driving them far from the city lights to a spot where the sky seemed endless above them. But it wasn't just the planned moments that had changed. They had learned to find each other in the ordinary days too. Morning showers were sometimes shared, not always for romance but sometimes just to talk about the day ahead. Notes appeared on the bathroom mirror, simple messages written in the steam. Have a great day. Can't wait to see you tonight. You make me happy. Emma slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to wake Tom. Today was her turn to surprise him, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She padded to the kitchen and began gathering ingredients. Coffee first, then pancake batter, fresh berries, and the special maple syrup they saved for special occasions. As she moved around the kitchen, Emma thought about the journey they had been on these past months. It hadn't always been easy. Old habits had tried to creep back in, working late, forgetting to really talk, taking each other for granted. But the promise they had made to each other that day had given them something to hold on to when things got hard. The shower had become a symbol for them, a reminder of vulnerability and honesty. Sometimes, when discussions became tense or they felt distance growing, one of them would simply say, "Shower talk," and they would move their conversation there, letting the water remind them of that turning point in their relationship. Emma heard footsteps and turned to see Tom standing in the doorway of the kitchen, his hair rumpled from sleep. He wore only sweatpants, his chest bare in the morning light. The sight of him still made her heart skip, even after all this time. "You're up early," he said, his voice rough with sleep. He crossed the kitchen to wrap his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What's the occasion?" Emma smiled, leaning back against him. "Do I need an occasion to make breakfast for my boyfriend?" Tom kissed her neck softly. "Absolutely not, but you're making the fancy pancakes and using the good syrup. That usually means something special." Emma turned in his arms to face him. "Today is special. It's exactly 3 months since our day, since the shower." Understanding dawned in Tom's eyes. 3 months already? His arms tightened around her waist. "Best 3 months of my life." Emma reached up to touch his face, her promised ring cool against his warm skin. "Mine too." Tom caught her hand and kissed her palm, then the ring on her finger. "Thank you for joining me that morning, for taking a chance on us." "Best decision I ever made," Emma said softly. She looked around their kitchen at the life they were building together, then back at the man she loved. Who would have thought so much could change because of one shower? Tom laughed, the sound warm and full of joy. "I don't know, but I'm thinking we should celebrate properly." His eyes sparkled with mischief. "Breakfast can wait a little while, can't it?" Emma pretended to consider this, tapping her finger against her chin. "Well, the batter does need to rest." Without another word, Tom scooped her up in his arms, making her squeal with surprise. He carried her down the hallway toward the bathroom, both of them laughing. "What are you doing?" Emma asked, though she knew the answer. "Taking you to where it all began," Tom replied, pushing the bathroom door open with his foot. "I think we should honor the tradition, don't you?" As the sound of running water filled the bathroom and steam began to rise, Emma wrapped her arms around Tom's neck. What had happened in the shower with her boyfriend 3 months ago had saved their relationship. It had reminded them that love wasn't just about the big moments or grand gestures. It was about choosing each other every day in all the small ways that mattered. And as they stepped into the warm spray together, Emma knew that whatever challenges life brought their way, they would face them together, sometimes with careful plans and promises, but always with the simple honesty they had rediscovered that morning 3 months ago, when they had found their way back to each other, one drop at a time.